Game design has always been an interest of mine. From wanting to work on Pokemon when I was young, to analyzing games I play now to see the purpose behind their design decisions and what makes them fun. For example, in Slay the Spire, the Ironclad's burning blood incentivizes players to not fully block all damage, and rewards taking little damage in a fight. Or in Puyo, how offsetting damage causes a massive change in the game loop, and how removing offsetting degenerates the game to an extreme degree. Of course, this isn't a random trait. I eventually want to make my own games, so I examine the games I like to see what makes them fun, or what could have been done better, to give myself a better idea of what makes a game good. But I'm also not one who learns well by watching. I learn best when tinkering with things myself, trial by fire, which leads to this video. But before we get into the changes, I want to mention two things. First, any numbers in this video are not fine-tuned and lean more to draft estimates than anything finalized. This video is more about the concept of the changes. Second, as this is supposed to be practice for game balance, I, of course, ask for feedback and problems you find in the weapons I have. Just be civil about it. The first few Scout's weapons aren't very interesting as they're pretty well balanced. Despite that, there are still some choices that have to be made. For instance, the Force of Nature. Despite being well balanced, it does have one major flaw, which is that your first shot will knock your target away from your most effective range, making your second shot do notably less damage, which will fairly commonly lose the kill. You could give it something like a tighter bullet spread to fix this, or leave it untouched under the idea that you trade damage and consistency for the notable increase in mobility it provides. I've decided to go with the latter, leaving it untouched. I won't cover every weapon I don't change, just those that I had some ideas that I decided against, or I think have something interesting to mention. Like the Force of Nature, the shortstop isn't bad at all. However, there's the shove. After 9 years of seeking an answer, philosophers still only conundrumed up the first step to why God added it, and I don't think anyone cares anymore. So I'm just going to increase the shove force and lower both the input delay and recovery time. This probably won't make it something you want to use, but it might at least have some scenarios where it's worthwhile, and that's more than I can say for the current one. For the last of the already balanced weapons comes the Soda Popper. There is one thing about the weapon that I feel is underwhelming, I suppose, and that is hype. I feel like hype isn't as useful as it's intended to be. In low roof maps, you don't really have the room for the jumps. And even without low roofs, Scout usually wants to be as close as possible, especially with the sawed-offs. And being high above your enemy goes against that. But it does make you much harder to hit. I thought about replacing some of the jumps with a speed boost, or about giving it either a tighter spread or a faster reload while hype was active, but after going out of my way to use hype more, I realized that when it works, it's really strong and might not need to be changed. So there's a choice. Either change hype to be more commonly usable, but risk making it stronger than it should be, or leave it as it is. And because I can't do any actual testing, and rarely fight Scouts using hype, I'll just have to leave this one untouched. Oh, also, this isn't related, but while researching all this stuff, I realized the Soda Popper is the only scattergun that doesn't have this muzzle flash in its kill icon. You will never unsee this, you're welcome. Anyway, with the good scatterguns covered, we now move on to the ones that actually need changes. Babyface's blaster is a very odd case. It's not terrible, but it's also not good. It can feel over-punishing for one person hitting a mediocre shot on you, but making good use of it can make Scout super strong. This was probably the hardest of Scout's primaries to change, because it feels like this weapon is designed around peaks and valleys, but that's not usually what you want when you make something in a game. After struggling with my options, I decided to keep it as the moody weapon it is, as most of Scout's arsenal feels consistent enough that I'm comfortable with it being weird. With that said, the change, well, to be blunt, it's basically just Barrier from Risk of Rain. By dealing damage, you now also build Barrier. Barrier does nothing by itself, but taking damage reduces it before boost. It does not block loss via double jump. Barrier is capped at 50 and is passively lost at a rate of 2 per second. I chose these values because Scout's still capable of regaining boost and Barrier mid-fight. This doesn't make it so you can carelessly aggress stronger classes though, as it still only takes 38 damage for you to lose all your boost, even with full Barrier. Now that may not be much, but that's about a third of Scout's health instead of a fifth. This change, I'm not entirely confident in. Bay Faces isn't a terrible weapon, and I think it's one that could turn an inch into a mile. Though I'm trying not to give it too much, which might make so I don't do enough. Because of this, and the decently large change of the weapon, it's hard to estimate the effects it would have. Backscatter is a strange one, because it obviously pursues a flank-heavy ambush playstyle where fights are ended before they begin. Unfortunately for the Backscatter, Scout is already adept at ambushing, and even worse, there are two weapons that fulfill this idea better, and have other reasons to use them. The first idea I had was to change this into a double-barreled, but I felt like it would just be overshadowed by the other two as they are already good at ambushing. Even though the Backscatter would benefit highly from being a double-barreled because of that. But if it's not a double-barreled, then it fills a niche as a normal scattergun that excels in ambushing. I decided to have the Backscatter fill the niche. Final design is admittedly a bit gimmicky, but as this weapon already encourages you to play similarly to a spy, I wanted to lean into that. Replace the clip downside with a % damage penalty and change the weapon mini crits to instead deal double damage. This comes out to 158 at point blank. The last thing is to add Silent Killer to these double damage shots, so enemies won't scream when killed and the kill feed won't show to enemies. I'd also say reduce the normal shot sound to be quieter than the other scatterguns. My idea with these changes is to make the Backscatter feel somewhat similar to your Eternal Reward, making it harder to know when a scout is behind lines and stronger when ambushing, but making it much worse in head-on combat. This would still most likely be worse than the other guns, but Scout's already good at ambushing, so I don't know how to make this thing worth using. Moving to secondaries, there's much less to talk about, so this'll be much quicker. Both Bonk and Mad Milk have had their recharge changed to use the mixed system of the Gas Passer. Bonk takes 50 seconds or 230 damage to charge, and Mad Milk takes 70 seconds or 300 damage. There's not much to refer to when it comes to the mixed charging system because the Gas Passer is the only weapon that uses it, so these numbers are very much guesses. Mad Milk gets a second nerf. If an enemy is within 80 hammer units of the center of the splash radius, they'll receive the full debuff duration. But outside of 80 hammer units, the duration quickly lowers the further away enemies are from the splash's center, only being 5 seconds at the far ends. To compensate for this nerf, I'd increase the total splash radius to something like 230 hammer units. For the Winger, change its stupid 60% clip nerf to 50%, so it has 6 bullets instead of 5. I'd also give it a 10% faster firing speed. This is to make it better at quickly finishing off enemies, as I felt it rarely did better than the other pistols, and the jump height doesn't feel worthwhile enough to justify that. And I think it would still be worse in prolonged combat with the amount of reloading that would be necessary. Also, remember how the Soda Popper doesn't have a muzzle flash in the kill icon? Well, guess what? The Flying Guillotine is a strange case, as it's not really a problem, but it's also pretty dumb how many of these things you can just throw out. And it's a significant amount of mid-range damage for a class that absolutely does not need to be better at dealing damage, especially out of close range. So it's only getting a minor nerf, having its 6-second charge time changed to 9 seconds. To scale with the change, its long-range hits will reduce the charge time by an extra second. And that ends the secondaries. Not too much interesting, but I guess that shows how well balanced they are. I can't quite say the same for the melees, however. While not unbalanced in any major way, there are some notably less desirable options. Jump scare. I forgot to write a part in the script where I tell you to like the video, so I'm shoving it in here unceremoniously. To start, we have the fallen king, the Sandman. Well, it may be inaccurate to call it a king. This fucking thing was a tyrant for most of its life. Well, it's really more like half its life now. It's slightly under. But in about 8 months, the slowdown will have a longer lifetime than the sun. After its cruel reign, it got the London experience and became borderline worthless. As for its change, well, to be honest, I would just say use the rework that fish stick on a stick made in Bad Weapon Academy, where the ball applies marked for death, because that really is just the best change for it. If you want my own change, I'd probably switch out the health penalty to something boring like the 20% slower firing speed that a few melee weapons have, but the mark for death change is better. For the Candy Cane, I'd change the explosive vulnerability to a 10% vulnerability to everything. This means that you aren't immediately obliterated because the demo man is generally aware of your existence, just mostly obliterated. But the Candy Cane does not need to be nerfed, so there needs to be something else added to it. For this, I think an interesting change would be a 30% bonus from health packs. So small health packs, such as the ones you spawn, will heal 33 health, and medium health packs will heal 82 health. This should push the Candy Cane a bit further in its intended design, making you weaker in head-on combat, but keeping you better sustained over a life. Next is the Sun on a Stick, which reaches a new caliber of bad that us mortals were never supposed to uncover. Originally, I wanted to give it a throwable fireball like the Sandman or Rap Assassin, but I had a more interesting idea that I think could work, but it's pretty weird and kinda hard to explain. The idea is to first replace the fire resistance. Now when it's held, all debuffs are shorter. In my head, I'm thinking something like debuffs lose an extra second every second, but I'm not sure how TF2 deals with debuff ticks, so this idea may not work. Additionally, by holding right click, you'll create an area around you that reduces the debuff timers of teammates. If debuffs are being cleared, you'll regen 3 health a second, which fades away while not clearing debuffs, or immediately ends when not holding right click, meaning you're vulnerable while this is active. With the Sandman inflicting mark for death, the Fan of War is now just worse than it, so we're gonna have to make some changes. There are 2 ideas I have. One is simply allowing it to mark multiple people for death at once, which could make it useful as a more supportive, higher risk-reward alternative to the Sandman. I'd also reduce the debuff time from 15 seconds to something like 8. The other idea is making it so that the marked enemy also has Mad Milk applied to them, allowing them to be quickly dispatched while also letting yourself heal. Like the mark for death, this could only afflict one enemy at a time. The first design would be more supportive, most useful in team fights, but it would be borderline useless in the very likely scenario there's a sentry gun, and not very useful when you're on your own. The second design wouldn't be terrible for team support, but would be better at keeping yourself sustained in a fight and over a life, making it a risky mix of the Sandman and Candy Cane. I didn't know which of these to choose, so you get both ideas. Lastly, the Holy Mackerel fires 50% faster and deals 50% less damage, because fuck it, comedy. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more.